From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Joe Matthew, I'm Caitlin Lyons.
15 days to Election Day, and the latest polling shows the race tied between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump in the swing states. We talk with Obama campaign manager Jim Messina, Democratic strategist, about the candidates' closing arguments and their travel schedules as they try to turn out voters.
And today we'll focus on what a Trump or Harris administration would mean for Social Security, as neither campaign has presented plans to fix it. We've got new research from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget.
And as the U.S. pushes for a ceasefire in Israel's wars with Hamas and Hezbollah before the election, we'll discuss next steps with Mara Rudman from the University of Virginia's Miller Center. Thank you for joining us today on the Monday edition of Balance of Power here on Bloomberg TV and radio. Vice President Kamala Harris hitting no less than 3 swing states today, while Donald Trump spent the day in hurricane-hit North Carolina. He was asked whether Congress should return to Washington to help hurricane victims.
I would be in favor of it. Yeah, this is a very unusual situation, and I would be in favor of it. It's a shame because they should have the money. They spent money that I don't believe they're supposed to be spending for that, as you know. So I think it's a disgrace what happened with FEMA.
Let's bring in Bloomberg's Megan Scully joining us today at the table with more on the campaign. 15 days. Kind of hard to believe we're actually getting this close. And it's been interesting watching these campaigns refine their closing arguments, which seem to be evolving. Donald Trump was talking about everything from Arnold Palmer to suiting up at McDonald's yesterday. They closed, by the way, while he was there. What is Kamala Harris's closing argument, if not a vote against Donald Trump?
Well, that is a big part of her closing argument. We saw it today, and we will over the next few days as she campaigns with Liz Cheney, the Republican who famously came out, against Trump and in support of Harris. So, and we saw today Liz Cheney telling Republicans just outside of Philadelphia, it's okay to vote for Kamala Harris, which is what Harris needs right now because the margin is so small in these swing states and there are so few undecided voters at this moment.
Well, with that in mind, is it really about trying to change minds at this stage with just over 2 weeks to go, or is this just getting everyone who might be in your corner showing up to the polls?
I mean, the two candidates could not be more different, right? And, our reporting has indicated there are some people who are truly undecided. I think that margin is very small. I think the undecided nature tends to be more not undecided on the candidate, but undecided on whether to vote.
The latest polling certainly underscores how close this is. Washington Post Schar School registered voters 47 to 47, a true tie. Among likely voters, 49% for Harris, 48% for Trump. So this is still within any margin, a statistical tie. You talk about undecided voters. There are so few of them out there. How do these campaigns spend the next 2 weeks finding them?
So what you're seeing is each camp is trying to peel off a couple of percentage points from the other. So you saw that today with Cheney and with Harris, and we'll see that across the blue wall in the next few days. For Trump, he's trying to pick up a few, some support among black male voters, Latino voters, and some Jewish voters as well. So all traditionally heavily Democratic groups, but he sees an opportunity, particularly on his argument on the economy, where he does outperform Harris in terms of voter response. We'll see him digging down into that as well.
Yeah, it was fascinating in that Washington Post poll. Those voters who are undecided tend to be younger,
that's right,
and they tend to be voters of color, which is where we're seeing a lot of targeting of these candidates' message. Bloomberg's Megan Scully, thank you so much for joining us. Now, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is heading to the Middle East for his 11th trip to the region since October 7th of last year. It comes as President Biden urges Israel toward a ceasefire deal after the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar last week. Here's what Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, today said about the goal of the trip.
We do want to de-escalate the tensions and also obviously provide that lasting stability. Do we think this will have an effect? We believe, and this president believes, when a diplomatic resolution, a diplomatic conversation is certainly key to dealing with issues that we're seeing across the globe.
Let's bring in Bloomberg's Dan Flatley, who covers national security for us, for more. So, Dan, an interesting time for him to go to the region, as there's obviously still conflict raging in many parts of it. Is this really just taking advantage of the opportunity of Sinwar's death? Does he think on this 11th trip he could walk away with something he wasn't able to on the first 10?
Well, I think the perspective is basically you have to try. You know, you have a very unusual event in the discovery of the death of Yahya Sinwar. And you sort of want to capitalize on that moment while it is in front of you, right? And so even if the prospects for a ceasefire deal are still what they were, you know, a month ago or 6 months ago, potentially that, you know, that event itself could provide some momentum, although I think we're unlikely to see anything happening before the U.S. presidential election, simply because that is a big unsettled event out there that needs to sort of enter into the equation, and we need sort of an output there, another data point as all of this comes together.
Significant intelligence leak over the weekend. New York Times, I believe, was first to report on these two documents that give us a sense. These are classified U.S. intelligence documents that give us a sense of Israel's plan to respond against Iran. Are you surprised we're sitting here on another Monday when this hasn't happened yet?
I am a little surprised, Joe, to be honest with you. I mean, typically you want to seize the momentum, the initiative with this type of thing. But, you know, on the other hand, I think that there is, from the Israeli perspective, there's no downside necessarily to waiting. I think that what we've seen, obviously, is some back and forth between the U.S. and Israel over which targets Israel will strike. And it seems to that at this point we're moving away from expecting a strike on oil sites or civilian sites or nuclear sites, and maybe more toward military sites. So I think that's part of the equation here, too.
Do we expect that response could change in light of the attempt on Netanyahu, or what appears to be an attempt on his life, a Hezbollah drone being sent toward his personal home? No one was injured, obviously, but it's caused a lot of upset in Israel.
Yeah, I don't think that the response will change materially because of that, but I do think that it certainly adds to the sense that this will not be over anytime soon, that this conflict will continue on, you know, beyond an Israeli response, certainly, and it does make a ceasefire agreement that much harder to reach because it sort of indicates that there are some very substantive threats out there that will continue beyond an Israeli response.
Should we assume, and I have no idea how you're going to answer this, maybe not, that Israel would hold off on a response to Iran while Secretary Blinken is in the region?
You know, I don't think that they would hold off or carry out a strike because of the timing of this visit.
I see.
Obviously, dignitaries traveling in the region is something that you want to consider as part of an overall sort of security posture. But at the same time, and Joe, we talked a little bit about this earlier, you don't want to sort of give any indication to your enemy that you're going to be more likely to do something or less likely to do something because of an exogenous event, something that's happening outside of, you know, the security situation. So it's possible that that might enter into into their calculation, but I sort of doubt it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting optics if he did end up there when it happened. Bloomberg's Dan Flatley. Thank you, Dan, so much for great reporting on this continued story. Coming up, a closer look at the final push the candidates are making now, with, as we mentioned, just 15 days left before Election Day, reminding ourselves, of course, early voting is already happening in some important swing states. Jim Messina, founder, CEO of the Messina Group, chair of the Democracy Defenders PAC, will be with us next on Balance of Power, Bloomberg TV and radio.
I'm a conservative, and I know that the most conservative of all conservative principles is being faithful to the Constitution. And you have to choose in this race between someone who has been faithful to the Constitution, who will be faithful, and Donald Trump.
Strange bedfellows. Republican and former Congresswoman Liz Cheney there campaigning alongside Kamala Harris in person, same stage, earlier today in Pennsylvania. Joining us now, Democratic strategist Jim Messina, former founder, I should say, and CEO of the Messina Group, chair of the Democracy Defenders PAC, and yes, former campaign manager for Barack Obama. Jim, great to see you. Welcome back. I wonder what your thoughts are when you see the optics there of Liz Cheney and Kamala Harris, who I'm guessing never spent any time together when they were both serving on Capitol Hill. They really don't agree on any issue other than their opposition of Donald Trump. And so as we're crystallizing closing arguments, is that Kamala Harris's argument? Anyone other than Trump?
It's part of our argument. Joe, if you and Kayleigh and I thought we'd be in a world where Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, Mike Pence are all supporting the Democratic nominee for president, if that was on your bingo card 2 years ago, you'd win a very big bingo game. But the truth is the Harris campaign attempting to do two things. They're attempting to expand their vote and bring in these new people, the people that voted for Nikki Haley in the primary. And two, they're trying to keep Trump's vote down. Trump is currently losing a record amount of Republicans. If they can make that number a point or two better in this basically tied election, then they could win this election over this. So they are having now Liz Cheney trouble with Kamala Harris almost every day, which is something no one could have seen coming a year ago.
Well, Jim, as you describe this as a basically tied election, which is what we're seeing in the majority of polling, this is within the margin of error in almost anything we're looking at. How do you feel about Harris's real chance of winning? Is it even possible to say with confidence that she will?
Look, the last election was 300,000 votes total in 6 states that Joe Biden won. This election looks like that, or maybe even closer. Anyone who tells you they know exactly who's going to win this election is trying to sell you the Brooklyn Bridge. What I think is true, Kayleigh, is that Donald Trump has kind of been at 48 for a year and hasn't moved above it. I suspect that Harris has room to grow that Trump doesn't. But now we're probably in a turnout election where, both sides are going to test their vaunted turnout machines. And whoever has the best machine may be the next president of the United States.
I talked about this earlier on the early edition of Balance of Power, Jim, with J. Michael Bitzer, professor at Catawba College. We were focused on North Carolina in this conversation. Here's what he had to say about predicting the outcome.
Coin toss. Flip a coin. Heads for Harris, tails for Trump. You're probably about as great of a predictive model as anything that we can put together at this point.
Look no further than the latest Washington Post poll. They did this today with the Schar School. I'm sure you saw it, Jim. 47-47 among registered voters. They're a point apart, likely voters. This could not be closer right now. The poll also finds a group identified as the deciders. These are registered voters, not committed to any candidate, whose voting record leaves open whether they will cast ballots at all this fall. You've run campaigns before, Jim. If this is the deck that you're playing with, this is the hand that you're playing with, how do you use the next 2 weeks to get to these deciders?
Well, if you think about it, Joe, in a campaign, you have three things. You have time, you have money, and you have volunteers. And the one thing you can't make more of is time. And so you're going to use the next 15 days to get to those voters. These deciders are the hardest people to get to. They have an average of 2.8 jobs. They think about politics 4 minutes a week. They tend to be single mothers. They make up their mind very, very late. And to your point, they may actually not be choosing between candidates. They may be choosing whether to vote at all. And usually those voters move at the very end on the economy. You can tell the Harris campaign believes that because they're pushing really, really hard on the economy right now and attempting to remind people of the chaos that Donald Trump would bring their next 4 years.
Well, as you mentioned, the things that you have to work with, time being one, money being another. Jim, at this stage in the game with 15 days out, how do you deploy cash and how much do you need to conserve for the expected legal battles that will come after November 5th that could be just as consequential?
Kayleigh, it's a brilliant question. I'm part of the Democracy Defenders PAC, and we're talking about that this morning. And the truth is, if we're in a legal fight at the end, all the money you need will come. Your job between now and Election Day is to spend whatever you think you need to do to win, and then you can worry about paying the lawyers later. And, with money right now, I would do three things. I would spend a bunch of money on social media, which is where people are having these discussions. I would continue to buy TV ads, and then I would try to get Kamala Harris out there as much as they can. She's hitting 3 states today while he did one press conference. He said he's exhausted and going to take a day off. She's going to hit 3 more states. She's just got to keep pushing in a race that is essentially tied.
Well, I need to throw you a little bit of a curve here. And to be clear, I think it was a report that said he was exhausted. The campaign was taking issue with that. But look at Pennsylvania. If Pennsylvania is going to decide this election, Jim, the Cook Political Report today moved its rating on the Senate race. This is Bob Casey, David McCormick, from leans D to toss-up. Is there a world in which the Republican can win the Senate race and we see actual ticket splitting where Kamala Harris wins the presidency? Or did we just put the whole state in the toss-up category?
Well, I think Pennsylvania has been in the toss-up category in the presidential since this race started. We run 66,000 simulations of the election every night, Joe, and we have Pennsylvania being the tipping point state in about 70% of those scenarios. So it's not surprising that the Senate race is as close as the presidential race. Usually the big races on the ticket travel together. Weirdly, in the great state of Nevada is the only state where that's not really true, where Jackie Rosen's kind of blowing out her opponent in a very close race in the presidential, but all the other ones are close, and people tend not to be the ticket splitters that you and Kayleigh and I grew up with.
Jim, in the last 15 days here, what's the sleeper you're watching? What are we not paying adequate attention to here in the final stretch?
The legal fights, Kayleigh. I mean, there's already 100 lawsuits that the courts are deciding every single day that are affecting everything. You saw on Thursday or Friday, the courts strike down the new Georgia laws. There's lawsuits being filed every day on early votes, on who can vote, on these what we call infrequent voters, whether they can vote. Those things are really, really important for 2 reasons. They do affect who can vote before the election, and they're on both sides trying to set up legal challenges for after the election. It is very unlikely we're going to know on election night who wins, and I promise you we'll still be suing each other for a very long time after that.
Yeah, Bruce Melman is out with a note today on Substack. You probably saw it, Jim, called The 9-Week Slog, talking about what will happen between Election Day and January 6th when votes are certified. Do you think this race then will be solved in the courthouse or at the ballot box?
Well, I think it'll be solved at the ballot box, but we're sadly going to need the courts to reaffirm it and to put down some ground rules, because that's just kind of where we're at. An election as close as the 3 of us think it's going to be, this is going to be incredibly contested at the legal ballots. The good news for Democrats here is that the courts have largely sided with the pro-democracy arguments. They've struck down most of these Republican lawsuits, but, it's going to lengthen the election. It's, some places now you have to count paper ballots. That's going to take a long time. For those of you hoping to drink early on Election Day, you might be not drinking until the week.
No drinking games.
All right. Well, there we go. Jim Messina, always great to have you, sir. Thanks for your time. He's founder and CEO of the Messina Group and former campaign manager for Barack Obama. Coming up, 33,000 striking Boeing workers set a vote on a tentative deal with the company. That's coming up on Wednesday as the plane maker releases earnings. We'll have a live report after the break, next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
I think most of the bad news overall is behind us, and now we can look forward and get this contract hopefully done this week. If not this week, hopefully very soon, and then move on and start looking ahead past these earnings.
That was Tony Bancroft, Gabelli portfolio manager and analyst, weighing in on the new tentative deal reached by Boeing and the union, representing 33,000 members who have been striking for 5 weeks. They'll vote on that accord on Wednesday, the same day that Boeing reports earnings. Joining us now for more is Bloomberg Intelligence's George Ferguson. So, George, this deal is a 35% pay increase over 4 years. If the union accepts it, what's it going to do to Boeing financially?
So, we've looked at this, and we think that it probably takes 1 to 1.5% off their margins for Boeing's commercial airplane business. Now, the challenge is, what's the margins for Boeing's commercial airplane business? Because we haven't seen a profit in that business in quite some time. Look, in really good times, it's a double-digit business, so it's 10, 11, 12, 13-ish, in normal good times. So maybe this knocks a point or point and a half off that margin. Still a pretty good business.
Boeing reports before the bell, right, George? Just to understand, you'll have an earnings report and a conference call in the morning. We have to wait all day to find out the outcome of the strike?
Yes. So I'm not expecting a lot, obviously, out of the earnings call. My guess is that Boeing's management really doesn't want to say much about what they think the future is going to look like, because they just don't know if they're going to have a deal before the end of the day. And they've already released a lot of the details. The most important ones we care about: cash burn during the quarter, the cash position they're at right now, which the cash position is a little bit better than we thought, cash burn a little lighter than we thought, but they need cash. So they need the union to come back to work to generate cash, or they to go to the marketplace and raise more. So I think that'll be one of the big answers we'll have, hopefully by the end of the day, Wednesday, when we hear the strike vote.
Mm-hmm.
So when is Wednesday going to be the deciding day as to whether or not this is a company that gets cut to junk, George?
I think they're getting dangerously close, and so I don't think this can persist for a long period of time, for another month or so, and not have the rating agencies kind of look at it and really wonder when they're going to get back to investment-grade metrics. I mean, they're not at investment-grade metrics now, right? They're just not producing profits. And I think the folks at those agencies are trying to look past this. So, yeah, it's getting close. I wouldn't say has to happen on Wednesday, but got to happen soon.
Just got a little bit less than a minute, George. Does Kelly Ortberg outline any kind of big picture vision then in this earnings call that comes after earnings?
I guess I'm not really counting on that. I feel like he outlined the position they're in the memo to employees, and he told them it was pretty rough, both in the defense business and in the commercial business. And like I said, I think he just doesn't know supply chain. The longer you go, the worse shape supply chain is going to be. So not knowing when the strike ends, I think it's hard to lay out much of a vision at all.
Understood. Well, he's going to have a busy morning. George Ferguson on Wednesday. Thank you. Bloomberg Intelligence. Great analysis, George. It's good to have you back on Balance of Power. Coming up, we'll take a closer look at what's next in the Middle East with Mara Rudman, professor at the University of Virginia's Miller Center. That's next on Balance of Power, Bloomberg TV and radio.
What I can say is we take this very seriously, and as I've said many times already, we're very concerned. This is why the DOD, this is why IC, this is why DOJ are all looking into this, and so I would have to refer you to them. And as I stated many times, it's being investigated. We need to get to the bottom of it. We need to get answers before I can give you anything further from here. But it's being investigated by the appropriate authorities. We're looking into it. Are we concerned? Yes. Are we very concerned? Yes, we're very concerned.
That was White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre during the briefing today, addressing the leak of classified documents regarding Israel's plan for retaliation against Iran. Joining us now for more here on Bloomberg TV and radio is Mara Rudman, professor at the University of Virginia's Miller Center, director of the Ripples of Hope project focused on democratic solutions, and former deputy envoy for Middle East peace at the State Department. Welcome back to Balance of Power, Mara. As we consider this leak that took place this weekend, how do you expect that changes Israel's go-forward plan as we're still awaiting their response to an attempted strike on Israel with hundreds of missiles launched that happened now almost 3 weeks ago?
Sure. Well, I'm not surprised at the fact that Israel's response was not immediate. I think there are a variety of factors at play, including trying to maximize how much you can catch the enemy, in this case Iran, off guard in one way or another. So it seems that this may contribute to a longer period of time, this leak. The administration is clearly acknowledging that it happened, which also makes me think that there may be some effort to ensure that whatever happens is sufficiently different than whatever information was leaked.
We should note the two documents had been prepared by the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and are essentially interpretations of satellite imagery. We're actually watching where troops are being moved, where missile batteries are being moved. In the bigger picture here, we've already heard reporting that Israel will not target oil installations, will not target Iran's nuclear systems. Isn't the cat out of the bag already on what Israel is doing? How much does this change?
Hard to know. It's not good for any information to be out in public this is highly secret and compartmentalized information. The work that the National Geospatial Agency does, period, is. And the methods that Israel uses, who they're going after, in which ways, I think Kat is not out of the bag on that at all. I think it's still, quite unclear. We just know things they're not going to do. We don't know what they are going to do.
And we still don't know for sure timing. And I wonder how timing is influenced by the fact that Antony Blinken right now is on a plane back to the region for the 11th time since October 7th of last year. What role does he play, not just in potentially the determination Israel is making, but also in how this conflict in the region moves forward when he's walked away empty-handed many times before?
Well, what I would say is Antony Blinken has perhaps walked away without getting everything the United States wants or without getting the kinds of public statements or movement. I wouldn't characterize that as empty-handed, though, because I think we can't see what things his conversations have prevented, what has taken different routes. We only see the actions, which in some cases are not actions that the United States wished for. So I think his repeated visits there, his conversations that are probably tough in a way that you can have conversations in private that you can't have in public, are important, are ways to make gains. And the United States has made clear it wants to seize the opportunity that it sees from the killing of Yahya Sinwar and moving toward getting that ceasefire in Gaza as a way to get hostages out, get humanitarian aid into so many innocent Palestinians, and at the same time also have steps forward that can de-escalate the risks in the rest of the region.
Of course, the conventional wisdom in Washington right now is nothing happens until after the election because the Netanyahu government doesn't know whom it would be dealing with. Do you see that being true? Not only that, but the leader of Hamas was just killed last week, and no one is speaking for that group either.
So I'm not sure the silence from Hamas means that they don't already have a leadership succession plan in place. Yahya Sinwar, evil as he was also a brilliant strategist. Those two are not necessarily in contradiction. Sure. And I believe he left likely plans for succession there. I think there are any number of things that can happen between now and the election, things for the better and things for the worse. And for Prime Minister Netanyahu, he may be eager to see who prevails here in the United States, but he also is trying to maintain his own political position, and that is affected by actions he takes or doesn't take in his own country.
Well, it strikes me that we're considering here Israel's fight with Hamas, yes, but still an active front in the north, in the border with Lebanon as well. Do you see it as likely in your mind that after the death of Sinwar, a ceasefire in Gaza could be agreed to while there is still an ongoing fight with Hezbollah? Or do all of these things need to happen simultaneously if they are to happen at all?
I think it's unlikely that they happen simultaneously. I think they are interlinked. And for a variety of reasons, it wouldn't be surprising to me that the getting to a ceasefire in Gaza is the first step that can then help to de-escalate the situation in Lebanon, that can work to show Iran how much regional actors are together and allied against what they're trying to do as opposed to for. Those things require a way forward for Palestinians as well. And what Amos Hochstein, who's in Lebanon now, has been talking about is also a return to enforcing, if it was ever enforced, UN Resolution 1701 back from 2006 to move Hezbollah north of the Litani River and would also get Israel out of Lebanon.
Well, arriving in Israel before the Secretary of State is this advanced missile defense system, the THAAD missile defense system that we talked about last week. It's been deployed today. It makes you wonder, considering the push and pull that we've seen with Ukraine, for instance, have we given everything to Israel that it has asked for?
Well, the THAAD missile defense system, as I understand it, and Secretary Austin has spoken to it, is there to ensure Israel's ability to defend itself.
Yes.
And to defend U.S. interests at the same time. And so that is consistent with both our commitment to Israel and the job the United States has to maximize security and stability.
Whether it's a defensive or offensive posture, though, we have checked off every punch list that Israel has given us, correct? When it comes to military hardware, when it comes to support militarily.
I think that the Biden administration has maximized what it's able to do with respect to Israel. Having dealt with Israel in the past in negotiations over things that they want or seek from the United States, I would be skeptical that they would say that they have 100% of what they want and need.
I'd like to see that list someday.
All right. Mara Rudman, thank you so much for being here, professor at the University of Virginia's Miller Center.
Coming up on Balance of Power, our conversation with Maya MacGuineas, the president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, entering the conversation again today with a new report of the candidates' policy proposals and impacts on Social Security. It's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Kaylee Lines in Washington. Thanks for joining us. On the early edition of Balance of Power, we spoke with Maya MacGuineas, president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, following their report just out today on Donald Trump's economic plans, their impact on Social Security, as well as Kamala Harris's plans. Remember this, as you'll hear a lot more about it throughout the course of the week. Here's a piece of our conversation.
The discussion about Social Security has been completely backwards, with candidates promising not to fix a program that desperately needs to be fixed. And as we've been analyzing all of the policies of both candidates, we've been well aware of the void of discussion on this important topic. But what caught us by surprise is when we were going through the policies, we did find that former President Trump's policies, many of them would actually contribute, as you said, to a significant deterioration in the program's finances. As you asked specifically, there have been a lot of promises about cutting taxes for certain groups. Cutting those Social Security benefit taxes means that undermines a revenue stream that currently goes into the program. You would lose about $950 billion by not taxing those benefits for seniors for Social Security. Likewise, if you don't tax tips and you don't tax overtime, that's another revenue stream that's going to finance the underfunded program that would no longer exist. Cuts about $900 billion out of the program over the next decade. And then finally, the effects of getting rid of undocumented workers, mass deportation, and tariffs would actually have both potentially inflationary effects on the economy, which means higher COLAs for seniors, because when there's inflation, hurts many people, but seniors have an automatic bump up in their Social Security benefits, and it could reduce wages, both of which would cause further deterioration, we find, of about $400 billion. And so, like you said, this program headed towards insolvency within less than a decade. Current seniors are on track to be getting 23% across the board benefit cuts, which is unconscionable, terrible policy. They need to do something to fix it. And under these policies, we find that those benefit reductions would actually move up to 33% across the board benefit cuts. We need all candidates talking about how to fix the program. We don't need policies to make it worse.
Well, so how do we figure, Maya, you've been in Washington for a minute, how come no one wants to talk about it? This is a hands-off for both campaigns. That goes for Joe Biden back when he was running, and I guess still as president of the United States. This has been in a lockbox since Al Gore talked about it a whole bunch of years ago. Why won't anyone raise their hand knowing how many people this impacts? This would be a good political issue, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's become a pretzel of a narrative where everybody's talking about it backwards, as though protecting the program means doing nothing, when clearly protecting the program means doing something. We can't be saying to today's seniors, the current plan right now is you are heading for a benefit cut of about $16,000 per year when policymakers promise not to do anything to fix the program. But I have been here for a long time, and we do know that, unfortunately, reasonable fiscal policy can be very bad politics. Right now, we have candidates on both sides promising not to fix Social Security, not to touch these programs, and not to raise taxes, both of which are going to have to be part of an overall plan to address the fiscal situation. So good fiscal policy, not always good politics. That's a real problem for the issue. And as long as pandering on this issue and promising not to touch benefits when they actually, benefits or revenues, when they need to be changed to fix the program, is it's doing a huge disservice to seniors. Frankly, I'm surprised the ARP isn't out there saying to everybody, "Where's your plan?
Absolutely.
You need to have a plan to fix this program."
Maya MacGuineas, president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, speaking with us earlier. You can find that full conversation online or on the terminal. Meanwhile, the Harris campaign is already responding to the committee's report. Here's what the vice president said in Michigan this afternoon.
There are many seniors in our country that Social Security is their only form of income. And now an independent agency has reviewed Donald Trump's theory about Social Security and his policies and has indicated that his policy would actually render the Social Security fund empty, essentially, in 6 years. Donald Trump clearly does not understand the needs of working people.
Still ahead, we're 15 days out from Election Day. We'll have a look at the Harris and Trump campaigns' final strategies. Our signature political panel joins next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
We have the chance to say, we're going to reject cruelty. We're going to reject the kind of vile vitriol that we've seen from Donald Trump. We're going to reject the misogyny that we've seen from Donald Trump and J.D. Vance.
We need a healthy two-party system. We need to be able to have these good, intense debates about issues that are grounded in fact. How about that?
Imagine.
Let's start there.
Kamala Harris campaigning alongside former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney of Wyoming and Pennsylvania earlier today, part of a blitz of all three of the Blue Wall states. Joining us now for more here on Bloomberg TV and radio is our signature political panel. Rick Davis, Stone Court Capital partner, and Jeannie Shanzano, political science professor at Iona University and senior democracy fellow at the Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress. So welcome to you both. Rick, if we could just begin with you as the Republican on the panel. How powerful is Liz Cheney at potentially moving the needle in what we understand to be a statistically tied race? Is it moderate Republicans who don't want to vote for Trump that ultimately could make or break this race for Harris?
Yeah, I must admit this is the first time in my history I've seen a Democrat closing arguments be about Republicans should support me. So, as polarized as the country gets, I think this is a bit of a roll of the dice. No question, Liz Cheney, I think, is a symbolic figure now, arguably the leader of the Never Trumpers. Whether she can pull votes from those who are soft Never Trump, if there's such a thing, maybe former Nikki Haley supporters who have still been sitting on the ledge, wondering what to do in this election. I think it's a hard sell. And I'm surprised, frankly, that the Harris campaign is investing so much of these waning hours making a pitch to soft Republicans when I haven't seen that movement in the polls that indicate there's enough capacity there to change an outcome.
I wonder your thought on that, Jeannie, and this idea of closing arguments crystallizing on both sides around Donald Trump. He says, vote for me. Kamala Harris says, don't vote for Trump, as opposed to here's a reason to vote for me. That's a question that we have going into these final 2 weeks. How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, we know why they are closing with these Republicans, because the data that the Democrats have gotten has shown when you talk about three issues, number one, the fact of January 6th and the fact that people who know Trump the best don't want to support him, that has had an impact on some of their focus groups. The other thing is abortion, and the third thing is Social Security and Medicare. And so those are the things that I think we're going to hear the most of. And, you know, we've been hearing not just like today with these town halls with Liz Cheney, but by some accounts, the Democrats have spent more money in the last few days on ads with these Nikki Haley, quote unquote, Republicans or soft Republicans, never Trumpers, than they have even with abortion ads. So that tells you that the data is there to suggest that this 6% they're going after, this is what might move the needle. And, you know, I think the reason that we're hearing her close on be very frightened of Donald Trump, he's unhinged, is for the same reason, because they feel that whoever this election is about is going to lose, and they want to make it about Donald Trump. And quite frankly, with his antics this weekend, he makes it quite easy to point to him and say, look it, can you really see this guy in the White House again?
Well, as Jeannie alludes to this weekend, you did spend some time in Pennsylvania, not just making a stop in a staged working at McDonald's, but also making some comments about the physical attributes of Arnold Palmer. As we discussed Pennsylvania, though, Rick, we did get some new polling out from the Washington Post on the 7 swing states, including Pennsylvania. Their poll finds Harris up by 2. The same day, the Cook Political Report moves the Senate race in Pennsylvania from leans Democrat to toss-up. So which one do you buy?
Both. I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
Okay.
I do think there's a narrowing of these Senate races by and large with what looks more like the national vote, which means it would have to be tight, and that's where we are. Whether somebody's up by 2 or down by 2 is statistically irrelevant. These are dead heats. It's going to be a dead heat in the Senate race in Pennsylvania. It's a dead heat in the presidential contest, and I don't think anything's going to change between now and Election Day other than millions of people voting within that dead heat. So I think that's I would say one thing, and it should not go underestimated. Donald Trump is good at what he does, and showing up at a McDonald's and for 15 minutes and serving fries probably got him $100 million worth of advertising since then. It is not a bad thing to have a former president in an apron handing out French fries. I mean, when you look at who's left in this election to vote, they're not going to think it's a joke. They're going to think he's everyman. They're going to think that this plays to his type. Just because he's a billionaire, forget all that. This was, I thought, the one day Donald Trump probably won hands down.
Is it a good thing as well, Jeannie, to have your biggest donor giving out $1 million a day? This is what Elon Musk is doing right now. He's going to give $1 million a day to anyone who signs, or they'll pick one a day, a sweepstakes, if you will. This petition calling for free speech and the right to bear arms. What makes us think that a bunch of Harris supporters don't sign the petition and get the $1 million? Does this actually help get people on the Trump campaign?
You know, I'm not sure, because I don't think we've ever seen something at this scale. And of course, Elon Musk attracts a lot of attention, and the Trump campaign feels as it becomes to this targeting of these young men that are hard to get out, these kinds of things might work. That said, I think the money would be better spent with a real concerted and robust get out the vote drive. And that's where I think Donald Trump's campaign could really benefit. And that's not what Elon Musk seems to be focused on. So, you know, that's the reality here, and it gets attention, sure, but I'm not sure if like clicks on X elicit votes in the polling booth where Donald Trump really needs them.
We have about a minute left here, but I'd like to get you both on this. We're acting as if there's just 2 candidates in this game here. That's technically not true, Rick. Jill Stein is a factor. Should we be talking more about her?
Yeah, if Kamala Harris loses Michigan by less than 1% and Jill Stein gets 1%, which is about what she's polling these days, people are going to be talking a lot about her. But the bottom line is it's a reality. She doesn't go away. And the other reality is she's not going to garner more than maybe 1% of the vote, if that. So if it does affect the outcome, I think Democrats are going to have to look, at the situation and figure out how do they stop her from running again.
Jeannie, we've got 20 seconds. How worried are you?
It is a concern. I don't know. I was thinking, is she the new Pat Buchanan or Ralph Nader to go back to 2000, something like that? And people are worried. Even her own sons are saying, get out of this thing.
Well, Democrats are, too. The party with a first-ever ad buy against a third-party candidate tells you where we are, I guess, Kaylee.
Indeed.
Interesting Jill Stein dive in the New York Times over the weekend. Rick Davis, Jeannie Shanzano, thank you so much for the great analysis. And check out the Washington Edition newsletter on the terminal and online.
And, of course, you can find us back here tomorrow. Thanks for joining us on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.